Today, I'm doing a video covering what chronic guilt felt like, chronic shame. I'm going to go in depth how that experience felt. Now, I lived with chronic guilt pumping away in the background 24/7, I would say for a good 5 years solid, pumping away, right? Now, I know you could be watching this video and thinking, well, I've had it for 20, 30 years, Sam. I've had it for 1 year, right? But we all know how intense that feels. We all know how challenging that experience is, right? We all know how hopeless that feels, how it feels like there's no way out many times. That inescapable maze I often compare it to. So when people ask me, Sam, what did chronic guilt feel like? How did you feel on a day-to-day basis? Now let me explain. It was like a big boulder weighing you down. It was like anything you would try and be excited for, any joy that you would try and feel, any bit of freedom, any glimpse of relief you would try and feel, it would be like, boom, slapped down to the ground, right? If you're suffering with real event false memory OCD, right? It can be like, no, this thing in the past happened. You're not ever being let off the hook. You're never going to feel peace again. You're going to have to stick with this chronic guilt forever. You're undeserving of anything happy, any joy, any peace, anything good, anything that's worth enjoying. Right? Let me give you an example of what I mean by that. So when I was suffering really bad with chronic guilt, even, let's say, trying to get a job, going for a job interview, right? It would just take out the complete meaning of it, the complete purpose of it. It all just felt meaningless because of this one thing in the past, because of the chronic guilt perpetuating 24/7, right? So they could say, well done, Sam, you're on a job, you're earning £10 million a year, well done, that's amazing. And I'd be like, well, nope, the chronic guilt is so bad, I can't enjoy that. My chronic guilt, this thing in the past will ruin it, so I can't enjoy anything. What's the point? Right? And I often use that analogy because if you speak to me, you hear me say that at my worst, if I won the lottery, I don't think I'd have been jumping around up and down going crazy, right? Because I was that consumed with chronic guilt, right? It really felt like nothing else mattered in the world, right? I was so internalized, so caught up in my own mind, which is completely understandable when we automatically ruminate. We've all been there. I'm sure if you're watching this video, you understand that. I lived like that for ages. I've been in your shoes, right? It can feel like there's just no way out. You can't see another perspective. You can't see a possible way out of the suffering, right? If you speak to Rob when I first came in, I'd be speaking to him, and then halfway through a sentence, I would just suddenly go quiet. I'd just stop speaking, right? Because all of a sudden I'd be caught up in my own mind. It's like you're suddenly hit back into your own mind. And that was so overwhelming. And then the anxiety would spike. And then that's what I mean by the big weight pulling you down, right? So it feels like you're getting somewhere, you're getting some relief. You feel, oh yeah, I'm understanding this. And then boom, slap back down, right? That's how it feels. That is really how it feels, right? Whatever you try and do, whatever interest you're trying to pursue, whatever hobby you're trying to enjoy, whatever activity you're trying to partake in, it can feel like there is no pointing that, right? It feel like, what is the point? Nothing else matters other than this feeling in your head. Nothing else matters other than this thing in the past or these thoughts you were having at unwanted times. Nothing else matters. Now, I remember going out, like socializing with friends, right? That was such a chore. That was such a task. Right? I didn't want to face the world, let alone put on a brave face and have a laugh and try and speak to people, try and start a conversation. Because when you're suffering with chronic guilt, your confidence is on the floor. Mine was on the floor, very, very low, rock bottom, right? So to go and speak to someone, right? And this is why I drank quite a lot, because it numbed the feeling of shame, the guilt feeling, it obviously increased the confidence where it felt like I could just forget about it. I know I was numb to the suffering. That's how it felt, right? So that could have easily become a problem with alcohol. So with that chronic guilt feeling, and this is something I talk about so much, and I'm sure lots of people can relate to, one-to-one calls, they all relate to this, if only they knew, whether that's a family member, whether that's a friend, whether that's a partner, whether that's anyone, any general public, right? It could be anyone, right? It could be my dog over there. If only they knew this, right? That's how it can feel with chronic guilt, to a point where looking someone in the eye, having a conversation with someone in the eye. When you first meet someone, you might give them a handshake, right? I'd be looking at the floor because confidence was on the floor. My confidence was at an all-time low, but all the time, battering away, getting absolutely bombarded with, if only they knew this, they wouldn't be shaking your hand. If only they knew this thing in the past, they wouldn't be giving you this job. If only they knew this thought you had, they wouldn't be complimenting you. They wouldn't be rewarding you. They wouldn't be giving you a pay rise. They wouldn't be saying nice things. They wouldn't even be engaging with you if they knew this, right? That was how it felt. That intense. That life and death. That all or nothing. Black and white. That's what we talk about on the channel. All right? Now, I often compare that with how I am today, right? Because I don't just sit and think about how I was. Yes, I get reminded, let's say if I'm looking at a photo when I was suffering, and because I work with OCD, I'm always looking back at my journey and taking points away and giving advice and pointers for other people. But when I think about how I am today, the one word that I use that was taken away with chronic guilt, right, was curiosity, right? Let me explain what I mean by that. I lost any interest. I lost any curiosity in anything, right? Because I was so caught up in my own mind. Now, for example, I enjoy reading about stuff I don't have any idea about. I felt like when I was really suffering, I missed so much, like things going on, didn't pay any attention, took too much effort, right? I was just caught up in my own little bubble, nothing else mattered. Example, right? I'm reading a book about space. I'm watching documentaries and films about space, right? Because I find it fascinating. Same with history, same with the war, all parts of history. It could be sporting history, music history, like things that have happened in the past where there's always like something to figure out, or wow, like one-off occasions, like things that just fascinate me, right? But in the past, anything that took effort, because you got to think my energy was completely zapped, right? It was like a mental battlefield in my own mind. From the minute I woke up in the morning, from the moment I went to sleep, it was like a war zone in my brain, in my mind, right? Exhausting, absolutely, like mental torture, right? I'm trying to use this way to describe it. I don't describe it like that anymore because that kind of negative language doesn't help. But in that moment, that's how I felt. That's how I was describing it to other people in that moment, right? Really, really tough, really challenging, right? Because quite often, let's say I would be at work, right? And I used to go to work as a distraction. So I'm glad I did go to work because obviously it helps financially, it helps with the routine and the structure of life, and just gradually taking your life back, getting back to work, right? Because you're socializing as well, which is good. But I remember having conversations with people at work, right? And they'd all be looking forward to leaving work. They'd all be looking forward to the weekend, to Friday night. They'd all be looking forward to, let's say, Christmas or their holiday they had planned, right? They might have 2 weeks off and they'd be saying, I can't wait to go. I really can't wait to go. It's like a countdown, right? But with me and chronic guilt, I thought, oh no. I was just full of dread that as soon as I left work, because work was like a distraction, it was like, yes, I can just focus on this for now. Of course, it was still there. It doesn't just disappear, but it was like, right, I can focus on this spreadsheet. I can focus on this laptop. I can focus on this, calling this person. I can focus on whatever, right? This meeting, right? I could do that. But as soon as I had to leave that work, as soon as I had to have a weekend in by myself or going on holiday or a Christmas or birthday, whatever, right? A big social event, a wedding, whatever, the dread would just sort of go through the roof. The guilt would go through the roof. The anxiety would go through the roof. The panic, the shame, embarrassment, all these feelings, right? And I remember feeling at those times like, fucking hell, is this what my life's come to? Is this all I've got to look forward to go into work as a distraction, right? Is that where my life is at? That I've got nothing else to look forward to. Anything that I try and enjoy becomes a complete dread, becomes something that I end up avoiding because I don't want to face that, right? So that was a really low point, right? That was really, really tough, because I even finding the motivation to get out of bed for that, right? Even finding the motivation to get up at 6 a.m, go and shower, go and put on your clothes, just basic things that I don't even think about now. Just saying, I was like, what is the point? Why even carrying on, right? And hence I was suicidal, right? I was on the phone to Rob crying, housebound, right? So that's the sort of depths that we've gone to, all the people on this channel, right? We understand the suffering. We understand the pits of OCD suffering, right? We've all been there. And this is why we're on this journey with you, guiding you through it, okay? We haven't just read a textbook on OCD. We haven't just watched a few videos on OCD. We haven't just Googled OCD symptoms and just trying to help you, right? We have been to the bottom and back, right? We have been to hell and back with OCD, right? So I often think about this, and it's hard to explain because people, when I'm on one-to-one calls, people only see who I am today, where Rob is today, where Mom is today, where Nick is today, right? But when I take myself back into those housebound, crying down the phone, suicidal times, it reminds me of the suffering. It reminds me of how low it can get, right? And this is why compassion is such a key part, right? Anyone who speaks to me know I am quite tough love, right? I am focused on discipline, persistence, hard work, right? But also there is lots and lots of compassion there because I've been there, right? So tough love and compassion is finding the balance, right? Not too much of one and too little of the other, okay? Of course, you're never going to strike a perfect balance because that would be a never-ending chase. But compassion that what you're going through is very difficult and very challenging, but then not too much compassion where you're playing the victim card, where you're going down the victim mentality and saying, why me? Or this is the worst thing ever, I can't stand this, blah, 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 right? But also the tough love with the strict discipline around reassurance, around doing compulsions, around venting, around confessing, around moaning, right? Having the discipline to do exposures like your life depends on it. Getting into some sort of routine of disputing on paper, reading the books, finding time to read the books on the reading list. Not putting it off until tomorrow, not saying, oh, I'm busy, I ain't got time, right? Something I hear all the time. We get you're busy. We're all busy, right? But this is when we need to prioritize recovery work, right? Look what OCD is currently taken away from you, right? Think of yourself or think of me in the pits of hell with OCD, right? With the chronic guilt, the feeling we all know too well, feeling like chronic guilt. It's how intense and real it felt, right? It felt like a police car would be parked outside waiting to take you away, right? Open up the curtains, oh my God, there's police are going to be there. Feeling like that 24/7, on edge. The analogy you often hear has been when you lean back on a chair and you haven't quite hit the ground, that moment in the middle before you hit the ground, that sudden panic, that sudden sort of life and death feeling that you get, that's how it felt 24/7, right? So even doing things like trying to get your life structure back with that in the background is very tough, all right? But you need to start taking those steps back. You need to start going towards living life, all right? You need to start making your decisions and not letting OCD play a part in all your decisions, right? You all know what I mean. You OCD sufferers, us OCD sufferers, know what you mean. You'll know what I mean, right? Because so often we think about something and go, well, no, that's going to be too triggering. That's going to be too difficult. I'm going to wait until I feel better. I'm going to wait until the anxiety's gone. I'm going to wait until the triggers faded out until I do that. No, we've got to do the opposite of that, right? That's too much control. That's too much resistance to it. Push it away, get rid of it. That's too much of that, right? We need to go into it, into the eye of the storm, jumping into the fire, right? So just think about all these points I've made on this call, on this video, right? Just think about that. Because now I don't want to sound cliche, but we do have one life. We've got one shot at this chance of recovery. Just think where we were 100 years ago. The chance of recovery, 0%. The chance to know what OCD was, 0.00001%. The chance to meet someone with OCD, 0.0001%, right? Because you're not going to even mention your thoughts. You're not even going to mention how you're feeling, right? Because usually you're so scared of that, right? I often hear it on calls now. People are so scared to even tell me what they're scared of because they're so caught up. Even saying their fear out loud can suddenly seem like it's convincingly true, can suddenly seem like that's too triggering, right? But if we don't confront our fears, if we don't go towards it, then you're not giving yourself a realistic chance of recovery, put it that way. You're not, because you can't chance your way there. You can't fluke your way to recovery, right? You have to go into it. The enormous amounts of discomfort, the confusion, almost like going into the wilderness, right? The feeling lost, right? Feeling hopeless. I remember many times when I started breaking down my beliefs, I felt even worse at the start because I was confronting my fear. I was writing down my fears. I was trying to see a different perspective. That ain't going to come easy because we're so used to irrational black and white demands, which is currently keeping us stuck, our perspective on things, keeping us stuck right now. So when we take the action to change that, when we make the decision that enough's enough, I'm fed up of this, that's what I had a lot. Fuck this, I can't do this anymore, right? That's how I felt. Endless nights of crying, endless nights of confession, endless days of avoidance, days upon days upon days upon days. I was just watching my life go by thinking, what has my life come to, right? So I thought, right, I need to start taking back control. Not control, I don't like using that word. I need to start taking back the decisions to my life. I want to call the shots to my life, right? This is my life. This isn't OCD. I have OCD, but OCD is not calling all the shots. OCD is not living my life for me, right? Because the mental bubble, the mental prison, the mental restrictions become smaller and smaller and smaller until you end up housebound like I was. All right? So when we become aware that we are in charge of our emotional destiny, that is when the cogs start to turn. That's when we get wheels in motion. That's when we build momentum. When we realise that we're accountable for our own suffering, right? That's not from a harsh, that's not from a really mean perspective, right? But it's the reality. Yes, we're here to guide you. We're here to help you. We're here to support you. The group's here to support you. But the only person that can get you out of chronic guilt, the chronic anxiety, the panic, the shame, the depression, I could go on all night. The only thing and the only person is yourself. And that's by putting in the work, right? I could have 30 one-to-one calls with someone, right? And I could say the same thing every call, right? But if you're not going to put in the work, then there's no point me telling you the same thing 30 times, right? Because the tools, they work, right? There's a track record of them working. It's science, what we learn here. It's not just for OCD, right? It's rational thinking, been proven for decades, right? But there's no guarantee it's going to work for you. That's a risk you're going to have to take with Fear of Fear, all right? But let's at least give it the best shot that you've got, right? These are tools that you learn for life, the overcoming obstacles, adversities, shit that happens. One of those things, pain in the ass moments, right? For better words. Okay, we all know, because life isn't just OCD. It plays a huge part in our lives. We understand that. But it's not like you recover from OCD and then you're problem free, right? You're not then stress free of everything. You're not doing cartwheels down the street, right? These are tools where we become more flexible in our thinking. We see things in life through different perspectives. We observe, right? We see that perspective, we understand that perspective. Yes, we still hold opinions. Yes, we still agree and disagree with stuff. But taking that step back and seeing things through a different lens is absolutely crucial, right? Especially with chronic guilt. The good and bad people concept, especially. The unconditional acceptance, especially with chronic guilt, right? If you're currently calling yourself an evil, horrendous, worst person on the planet, most horrendous person, terrible person on earth, then why do you think you feel chronically guilty all day, every day, right? If you're saying you could never be let off the hook, if you're saying, I couldn't possibly stand that, if that thing happened, I'd have to kill myself, why do you think you're feeling levels of chronic guilt? Right? If you're saying that I'm undeserving of any joy, I can't possibly enjoy anything ever again, I can't ever have peace again. If you're saying things like that, then those are the beliefs you're going to have to break down bit by bit by bit, whilst we apply unconditional acceptance, whilst we cut compulsions that we so desperately chase for relief. Right? Whilst we cut reassurance, whilst we cut confession, whilst we cut Googling, whilst we cut venting, right? These are very important points to remember. I hope you've enjoyed. If you are interested in one-to-one services, webinar services, WhatsApp groups, please email phil@ocdrecovery.com. There is a link in the description as well where you can WhatsApp him. And yeah, nice speaking to you, and I'll speak to you all again. Bye-bye.